So, welcome back to DevSecOps Talks with Paulina, and we are missing one musketeer today, probably due to Easter break. And we have quite interesting topic today, which Andrey is an expert in, as it's his product.
Yes. On the previous episodes, we have mentioned that we're building the getBoris.ai, which is like the Boris bot for operation release information security. Today we're going to talk more about it, but I don't think it would be fair to our listeners if it would be like a demo or sales episode. That's not what I really want to do here, and that's why during the last 90 plus episodes we didn't have any salespeople around. Because we want to keep it practitioner to practitioner, so I have a bunch of talking points I want to share and with you, like how we think about AI nowadays and what we do about it.
And I think it's also interesting, how did you build it? I think that's also, like how the process around it looks like a bit. That could be also interesting.
We might get to this, but there is quite a lot I want to cover. So let's get
You're
to
leading
this.
today.
Right. So the big question is that we've been having for the last 4 years: is AI taking over our jobs? One might say yes. Like you see a big layoffs in hyperscalers, for instance. Block actually cut like a half of their farmers tribe cut the half of their workforce because they expect to have higher efficiency coming from AI. You can see around tons of people running around, and everyone is now a developer with $20 subscription. At the same time, I recently saw the data that the actual job market is up, so there's like demand is higher than ever for the people in computer science. Another thing is, as I mentioned, like everyone is a developer nowadays with a $20 subscription. But the question is it going to last? I mean, you can see every provider of agentic coding tools are actually cutting off subsidies. So subsidies becoming less and less. You would need to pay more and more of API rates. I call that big squeeze, and my feeling is that 2026 will be a year of big squeeze because all of the companies that host LLMs and provide them, they have astronomical capex. Like Oracle is set to actually go cash negative, so they're borrowing money to build out the data centers. Someone got to pay for it. So the subscription model is not sustainable. And we'll see more and more subsidies drying up. I mean, Cloud, Anthropic and Cloud Code, they cut their subscription allowance like a week ago, and now up just like after a couple of prompts. Like if you do anything heavy with a good model, your subscription quickly becomes a pumpkin, and then you need to pay over and like pay the API rate. So that is something that's happening, and I'm bringing it up because that will drive the people thinking, like how they think about AI applied to the work they do. Because if you just have unlimited subscription for 20 USD, you can build wherever. But if suddenly you have to pay 2 or 3K USD, K being 1,000, you suddenly start to think twice, like, should I be building that at all? Because now it's like the real money being involved. And that's something that will affect thinking of all the leaders. Still, like subscriptions are not that expensive. And if they increase productivity for the people, it's still no brainer. While it's cost, like for instance, if you pay equivalent of salary of one person, like give it like 5 to 10,000, but it makes a team of 6 to 7 people twice as productive, it's still a win, and people will pay that. So, but economics is becoming different, not to what people used to. And there will be more and more focus on open source model because people will look for the sustainable models.
I think also the entry level gonna get higher for some people. So, like, okay, like in big companies, it can be maybe no brainer to, okay, I don't hire another person, but I have LLM, one person with LLM instead subscription. But for the smaller organization, I think it can be, harder to enter the market or to at least, when the thinking becoming more priority as well, that you don't only use, for every small thing, you don't use LLM as well.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So you will think what you use them for. You will start to count tokens. You will deploy it. Instead of today, like we just throw the tokens all over the place, you will start to do it more targeted. So depending how deep your pockets are. And that's a little bit of unfair leverage there. Now moving into the product, like the Boris, why do we build it at all? And what we are thinking there. So as I mentioned, the job market is still quite hot, and there is a shortage of good DevOps engineers. That's a fact. It's really hard to find the good DevOps engineers to hire. If that would be false, then not Paulino and I would have the customers. I mean, that's like the fact. Like we are in demand because there are shortages on the market. And this shortage leads to the fact that like developers waiting for the questions to be answered. There are projects stalling, waiting for the resources to be available to do those projects. So it might be so that we can use agentic AI, like Cloud Code Course or what have you, to do infrastructure. Like so developers might be able to self-serve. And it's true to some extent. So like the small stuff that might be addressed, but still you need to have a certain level of expertise to distinguish where the LLM gives you a bias or where the answer is good. And you also need to have a grounding for those LLMs that requires setup and sophistication on the user level to be able to validate the answers through the grounding facts. So it is helpful. Like the for coding is definitely helpful. For ops, it's helpful to extent. You still need to have expertise there. And also that expertise needed for the actual value add project. When you're building something new, you need to put quite a bit of architectural thinking in there, how to do that. So because the LLMs, they're regurgitators, they will regurgitate what they've seen before, like repeating the same patterns. But if you need to come up with something gently new, that's like where you need humans.
And also, I think you also need to take into consideration, that it's not only for example, 5 to 10 users, but you want your architecture to scale with you also. So there's some factors which you need to take in advance in a thinking in the beginning, which gonna make your work much easier later on without having to refactor as much. With kind of little work, unless you don't do it, it can be much harder to adapt stuff or to scale with time as well.
Yeah. And like even they're scaling the coding AI tools for the organization, making sure that they have easy setup across. That's already a challenge. And then you have also access permission. So like you might have your coding agent to access to your current AWS account, or you might teach it to use AWS as a so to get to other accounts. But to build a comprehensive picture, there is also like a limit of how much one agent can handle. You really need to have like a context slicing in there and refocusing on a certain size of it, part of it to get it to the good level, like the LLM produces the good results. And that requires sophistication that people might not have. Imagine that people actually find a DevOps person, they bring the person in, but then suddenly half of the time goes to be a help desk for developers, security people, managers, and so on. And that time is not being spent on value add tasks that actually could be. And in many cases, companies back to the market looking for the next person because the person that they hired kind of half consumed, so they're not getting the full output of that person that they could be getting. And there are other complications. So you have like pager duty, which is not everyone like to do. It also requires some legal paperwork because, like in some countries with stronger labor laws, like you cannot be on a pager duty all the time. So it is complicated, and there are, I think, two pieces of work that is like stuff that just needs to be done, which is not very sexy, and people don't like to do it. And we actually like, see it for ourselves and like our consultants. Like we usually write cost reports for the customers, but frequently people just miss to do that because they need to focus on the value add work. But then like you miss a cost report, you're missing some spend, and then it comes and bites you. So say there could be some maintenance work that needs to happen frequently. You just disregard it because you are too busy to do that or you forgot, and then that will play out as an incident or issue in production, and then you're out of commission for a couple of days doing the post-mortem and improvements to make sure it doesn't happen again. So there's like a bunch of stuff that actually constantly draining time from people, like the day two operations because of like toil is another thing. And they are predictable, they are repeatable. And this is where we think the LLMs could actually be useful. So those tasks, it doesn't require as much ingenuity and creativity. That just needs to be done on a schedule or in a signal. And that's where we believe LLMs kind of can help. I give you a different example. I mean, the problem is nothing new. What I'm telling you, nothing new. Like the developers needing support. Look at the platform engineering. The whole idea of platform engineering is developers can self-serve. Like we give them blocks that they can play with, put the solutions together, so they don't need to involve the infrastructure. And like from infrastructure side, yes, the platform engineering was the latest trend there. But I would say if you go 15 years back, like early day of Jenkins, people noticed that there are failing builds all over the time, and people back then were thinking, how do we triage this? And I remember Robert Sandell in Sony Ericsson wrote a Jenkins plugin that would do a regex on your build logs and potentially tell you what it could be. So that was like the early days of the same thing, right? So we've been thinking about how can we automate it for long years, like 15, 20 years. We've been thinking how we can automate those operations, developer support, and so on. But the problem back then was that, yeah, you can do regex, but they're brittle and they break all the time. Like you had one problem, you created regex, now you have two problems. And in most cases, you would need to have some kind of intelligence in there. What we are getting right now with the LLMs, that this, even with the smaller models, this intelligence actually kind of enough if you have enough context to automate part of their of those DevOps processes. And a final catch, we got all the coding agents now, which means the development work is accelerating and potentially the operations might become an even bigger bottleneck than they are today. I mean, it's not ideal today, but it might become even worse. So that's bringing us to inception of the idea. So our thesis is perhaps we can take all those tasks and offload that on the LLM. And, well, not LLM per se, but agent, like LLM wrapped in the agentic harness. And we want to see how far we can push this concept. So we're focusing on a DevOps task automation. We started from the task automation, where like you need to have a small thing to be done. For instance, answer the question. This is a task, right? So someone comes in, you need to answer that. And there are many ways to do that. Like even with the cloud code, you can get to a certain extent, like writing postmortems, troubleshooting incidents, automating your checks, like if you need to do some checks. And eventually we progressed from just task automation that's triggered by the human, because the problem is, like, imagine you bringing in a junior person. You had the stuff that needs to be done, but now you also need to tell the junior person what to do. So you kind of have that two problems again, and you don't really want to babysit AI there. So yes, asking AI to do the task is a good thing. It's a good start. But ideally, what you would want to have is to define that triggers, like might be a cron, might be an event on which the agent might be able to execute predefined workflow with all the access it needs, with all the memory it needs, with all the tools it needs to get it done. So then you transition from the task to workflow automation. Like this is like where we are right now. And then we are looking into the moving towards autonomous agent, which would like run full time, 24/7. I mean, like kind of running 24/7. But what I mean by like it's acting or like observing and making observations that could be used as a potential triggers for other workflows or preventive notifications. But the problem with this, like the fully autonomous agent, is how do you get that to sustainable level, right? So like imagine you are engineering manager. You wanna employ AI. Let's say like you wanna employ Boris. How would you think about it? Like, well, you first of all you need to understand a price. What do I compare price to? You take, for instance, like agentic coding tools. They are priced if you take API rate. So you have a subscription, and then on top you're paying API rates. API rates is a million tokens. So like you pay $1 per million input tokens, $3 per million output tokens. That doesn't make any sense to anyone. What is a million tokens? Is it
How do you define the
feature?
token?
Well, that's like the LLM tokens, right? So like the more or less one word.
Yeah, but what I mean, you want to know what you pay for.
Exactly. I mean, like
that's my point.
How do you put that in the context of work? You expand 10 million tokens. What is it work-wise? Like, is it a feature? Is it a pull request? Is it a written document? How do you measure it? It doesn't make any sense.
Exactly. What outcome can you get if you pay, for example, the $3 or $1 or whatever you pay?
Yes. So it needs a different model there. And I see the trend, and we're also going in the same direction with our thinking when it comes to the business model. It's actually like per hour billing, like the agent works an hour, you pay that much. And this is kind of what we've been operating for a long time now, right? So you go to Upwork, you hire someone for, I don't know, $80 per hour. And then that person works for an hour, you pay $80, you get amount of work done in that hour. It still doesn't answer clearly how much work you get, but if you think in those categories, at least you can start to conceptualize, right? At least you have something to grasp that is familiar to the humans.
You can compare it when, it's still not so common, because I think, hiring AI, it's still, especially out of tech industry, it's very, people don't know what you're talking about. My parents work in insurance. My boyfriend works in the construction site. For them, automation, it's still a big thing. without AI concept into it. So hiring AI, that's completely new concept. So at the beginning, we need to define what it is and what value they can get out
we
of it.
basically think about this way. So like one plan, you have a task automation, you have the agent, which is always available, and we bill you $25 per hour. The agent is working, and that's kind of clear. And then you can actually see how much time it takes for the agent to do the work, and we can gauge that, and like you have that many hours left. It's a easy concept for everyone to understand. It's easier than tokens, I would say, because you have no idea how much tokens it's going to get. And I don't think people should be thinking tokens. That's like internal mechanics of the tool. It's like more like the amount of work. And then you can also compare it like, okay, if I'm buying 20 hours per month per $25, it's like 500 a month, I have additional resource I can employ to do a certain work, or my engineers can take it. I have no commitments. I can fire it anytime. It's kind of the easiest thing to comprehend, but it also gives back a possibility to us to think about the tokenomics on the back of it. Like, how do we optimize it, making sure that the whole business model makes sense? And this is something that I would say all of the companies out there today still trying to figure out what is the business model of AI, right? Like you see all the people like building the data centers, as I mentioned about big squeeze. I see there is a bunch of companies in AI SRE category, but we should talk about it. So this is emerging, but if you haven't seen it before, you probably will see it soon enough. There is a new category called AI SRE. And as all DevOps and SRE stuff, it's actually misnamed, obviously, as usually we do in this industry, because those AI SRE tools, their primary focus is incident response and everything around incident response. The work of actual SRE is building systems and optimizing software so incident doesn't happen. But fine.
So we're coming up with the new niche and new titles of the roles. Not that we don't change. I think, I'm 8-9 years into industry. I've already done like 4 or 5 titles over these few years. And
yes. We are not learning.
My mother keep asking, "What are you doing at work?"
Like you come to bank asking for a loan, and they're like, "What do you do for work?" And like, do you want an easy answer?
Exactly. What name do you want today?
Yeah, exactly.
Or at some point you have, we have people DevOps / platform / SRE / cloud / infrastructure.
I usually say computers. I do computers. Informaticos, they call it here. In Spain. Anyhow, so AI SRE category is something that, like most of the tools in that category, they focus squarely on incident response. So something happens, and you can employ the tool to, like, through the connection to your Datadog, AWS, GitHub. So check the logs for you and then give you the answer. So like the Boris can do the same thing. Where we think we are different is because we want to go beyond incident response. Like we actually want to build the teammate you can work with. So first of all, like it lives in Slack and it's capable of the team communication. That's like one of the hypotheses we have. Because like all the interactions today you have with the AI, it's one-to-one. You talk out code in your terminal, you talk to cursor, you then go to ChatGPT, talk to ChatGPT. And then you need to go and tell the team what AI told you, or like copy it over. And in that, I think OpenAI and ChatGPT, they wanted to test group chats. I think they launched it in a limited beta. I'm not sure if it ever made it out of it. I haven't seen people using it much. But like when you're talking to people in Slack, you have an issue, right? You're discussing in the thread. you don't want to go to another screen and say like, well, like there in Slack, go fetch it, troubleshoot it, and it kind of kills it a little bit because then like you need to move that context around, and that's like way easier if the bot is in the same thread. You basically can say like, well, summarize the thread, build the postmortem. Here's your SOP or a skill, whatever you use there. Like we use SOP, standard operation procedures, for Boris, like where you describe how to do things, and it will go and execute, and it will have all the context. So like all that AI SRE stuff, the Boris is totally does. But as I said, like we want to go beyond that. We want to go beyond beyond the incident response, because there are like those day two operations that hurting you, and like as I mentioned, like doing the cost reports, totally can do that. Analyzing the AWS health events before like something happened, like before even your monitoring raised the question, can totally do that, and stuff like that. Getting the blog post, like you have all those AWS announcements, and I am as a consultant have continuously to do the mental gymnastics of reading the AWS announcement and thinking, does it apply to my customer? Like actually LLM can check what you are using and say, well, that's actually applicable to what you're doing. Maybe go take a look at this one.
Or maybe it's nice to actually also update, because I don't know, they came up with something new and that can improve whatever you have as well.
Right. Yeah, the way we see people using the Boris is you have Boris with access to everything. So it has a Slack context, it has GitHub context, it has AWS context. So in most cases, they will just say like, there's a piece of work, describe it with all the sources you have, put the GitHub issues there, and then they basically have their local AI, like Cloud Code, and they just feed the link to the issue, saying like, well, go do that. And then Cloud Code will have all the context. We are building an MCP server so the coding agents can talk directly to Boris and fetch extra context if they need. So every person locally doesn't need to set up the same access to all of those things. Like getting access to Slack, for instance, from locally is kind of hard. They released the MCP, but then there are still like a lot of permission issues. So there is this kind of aspects, and also you have a knowledge preservation story, which a lot of AI SRE tools say they do. So they say like, we collect the tribal knowledge, but then where does that knowledge go? That's the question. Like, so it goes to some SaaS company. You stop working with that SaaS company, that knowledge is gone. Do you want to engage in this relationship? So that's why when we started to build Boris from the day one, we actually self-inflicted certain architectural hurdles on ourselves. So,
yeah, but you know the issues, the problems which exist, because you work in this industry for many years. So you know what happens when someone leaves, when you have silos in the communication between people. We don't want to create a new silo of communication with AI on top of it, between AI and people and you. So you're trying to implement and resolve issue which you see from years on, and some which are coming. Additional complications with AI working alongside.
Yeah, exactly. So there is like the workflow thing, like what we discussed, how you can use it, but there is implication of trust. For all of that to work, you need to get agent in. So you need to connect it to your system so it has all the context and able to learn and remember things. But then like all of those tools will tell you, we preserve your tribal knowledge. But where does this knowledge go? They actually store it on their side. You disconnect the tool, the knowledge is gone together with the tool. So what we do is we actually store all the data we collect and structure. We store it on the customer side at rest. So when you set up the Boris, you provide the AWS account, and we will create like S3 buckets, DynamoDB tables, and everything else. All that, like, it's all serverless, so it doesn't cost much. But you actually own your data. So we will only load the data to memory for inference on our side. We don't store anything like from the data perspective on our side. Everything always stored on the customer side because we believe a customer owns its own data. We don't want
They
to hold.
should.
Yeah, they should, but that's like not the case really today
Yeah.
with the SaaS tools because they just hoard the data, and we believe that this is something people would want to have. At the same time, you see people YOLOing OpenClaw. Maybe they don't. I don't know. And just like giving all their sensitive data to ChatGPT. Maybe they don't care. I don't know. So this is something like the history might prove us wrong here, and like maybe we listen to this episode in a year or two and have a laugh of how stupid we were. But like that's our belief that this kind of security is important for people. Another important architectural hurdle that we introduced for ourselves, like first of all, when you build it this way, it creates a lot of complication because you need to develop the system so all the data is there. You only load the memory, which means like you cannot have a local like that. The whole design becomes quite interesting, I would say, and requires a lot of engineering gymnastics just to guarantee this promise. But then another thing that we do is we make it so that it doesn't depend on any particular model. Today, in most cases, you get Anthropic, but in the way it's built, it could be easily switched to the self-hosted, or open source LLM. And there are multiple reasons to do it. So, like we're using Anthropic through the Bedrock. Every customer gets its own account for the inference, so there is no sharing between customers, even on ours. So that every customer has its own account for the inference. There's like no data sharing. There's like no data crossing because time to time people seen that like the LLM can regurgitate someone else's data. So we're trying to isolate it as much as we can on our side, like taking all the AWS experience we have, building it for the customer. But then it's also built for the maximum privacy. So like if you want to go beyond Bedrock, if you just want to host your own LLM, like the open source LLM, it is possible to configure the product so it runs with inference on your side, either Bedrock, or they bring your own key, or the locally hosted LLM, because then it gives you a guarantee of the data privacy. And like that's another belief that we have. Like we're engineering it this way, so the data is private, it doesn't go anywhere. And then you also have another risks, like when you're building LLM agents, like LLM-based agents, all agents has tools, right? Imagine you have a tool to read the logs, like CloudWatch logs or Datadog logs or whatever. So the way the tool works, it will, like the LLM as an orchestrator will call the tool, which is a bunch of the code, will connect to the system, get the data, format it, and bring it back to the LLM. So it will return it to LLM. Imagine you are requesting the logs. Your application is leaking PII or PHI to the logs. You just share the PII or PHI with the LLM provider you use unintentionally or intentionally. Like this is implication that people actually not considering today, because you can unintentionally expose information, PII, PHI, PCI, to your LLM provider. Like you're running cloud code, you're asking cloud code to read your CloudWatch logs. Well, you just shared that data with Anthropic. Like, do you have a BIA with Anthropic? Maybe you should. Like if you are HIPAA compliant. It's not as a biggie because like technically they're not supposed to be reading what customer is sending to them. But there is a compliance implication that you need to consider. So that's also another thing, like why we're building it exactly this way, to prevent those issues. We even like have certain controls built into the tools themselves. So we would do a certain checks before tools return to the LLM, like trying to prevent exposure of the sensitive data to LLM. So like we will try to catch it at the tool level and then tell to LLM like, no, cannot show it to you. There is something that looks suspicious and you shouldn't see. Go tell to user, maybe user needs to see, needs to know about.
It's
there is
your
much
problem,
more to
not
tell,
mine.
but yeah, I can talk for hours about that. I think we will have more opportunities to do the follow-ups on it.
We can always divide it into two because we already have 35 minutes, so.
Yes. All of you who is listening till this moment, we love you.
Please come back.
Yes.
Come back.
I hope Matthias will get to listen to this as well.
I think we can divide it into two and cover the rest on the separate episode.
Yep. Let's wrap it up. That will be our 90s plus episode. I'm bad at counting them. But I think we are 2 or 3 episodes away from the episode 100. I think we're going to set the date. Probably it's going to be somewhere end of April, beginning of May, where we will going to record it and try to make it live. Julian said he will come. So we're going to be 4 of us. We will try to have a live audience calling in. Should be fun.
Hopefully. So see you there and hope you got through Boris' episode and see you in the part 2. Thank you.
Stay in touch. Bye-bye.
You have been listened to DevSecOps Talks with Matthias, Andrey, and Paulina. For notes and information, please visit devsecops.fm. Thanks for tuning in.